be something. Yeah. Well, all you really need is hope. I just want you to trust me if you wanna be something. Yeah, that's right. Let's go. Yeah, when you're feeling down and you're out, like you got nothing but doubt, you're alone in the crowd, just trying to figure it out. All that is cloud and this money got you feeling left out. Listen up to me now, every word that's out of my mouth. Wake up, it's me. You're gonna follow your dreams, or are you just gonna be another cog in the sea? You feel the hope in this beat, yeah, the hope that you need to proceed and be exactly what you want it to be. I feel right and I'm proud, hype and I'm loud. I'ma shout all about how I feel in the now. Ain't nobody ever gonna try to change me till I'm dead, pushing up daisies. I'm alone in the crowd, I won't feel down. I got hope right now, and I know I'll be found. I don't really care just what all other haters gotta say. I know everything I do is gonna make them fade away. Yeah. And when you feel like you're nothing, but you wanna be something. Yeah. Well, all you really need is hope. I just want you to trust me if you wanna be something. Yeah. Then all you really need is hope. Take a look in the mirror, are you seeing some fear? You hear the voice in your ear, can you start to see clear? Are the bad thoughts near? Or can you be where your feet are, yeah, when you stand right here and say no? I'm never gonna give up, I'm never gonna slow. The one that doesn't give up, never loses to a foe. The one that could show to myself I could go all the way to the top, can't stop me. I'm a soldier, always closer till it's over. Older, but I'm bolder, moving forward, motor, never slower. Good to know ya, don't go make me drop my shoulder. You need to believe you can achieve everything that you dream. Everything that you need is in the air that you breathe. It's in the mind that you feed. It's in the time that you bleed. Every second of life is another blessing to me. And when you feel like you're nothing, but you wanna be something. Yeah. Well, all you really need is hope. I just want you to trust me if you wanna be something. Yeah. Let's go. Yeah, it's what you need when you're down, need when you're out. It's what you need when you're sad and when you feel left out. You feel an energy drought and then creeps out, but with a little bit of hope you can figure it out. Keep your head high even when you're down inside. Through the pain you fight and through the painful nights you keep striving, keep trying, keep driving, rising, keep thriving, surviving. Nothing's in your way but yourself. Don't need nobody's help. You can make it through this hell. Take it one step at a time, one step as you climb. If you fail, you'll be fine. Get back up to the grind and never lose sight of your mission. Be driven. This life is a prison if you don't have vision. You're in it to win it, so get it, don't miss it. Your chances now, so be something somehow. Don't let yourself down. Sometimes all we really need is hope.
Yo, what up? Just doing the thing again. Where we at? How's everyone doing tonight? All right, let's fix that. Okay, so we are VR. You remember that? Okay, let's see that one. This one.
That's worse.
Okay. There we go. Nope. It's still there. Okay. Well, anyway. Today we're going to be doing pastures for sale, and we're going to be doing more anti-apologetics as we focus in better and better and closer to the actual aim of this channel. So let's have some fun. We're going to start off with the browser. We're going to move into Childers, and if we have time, we'll do something like that stacking. That's all going to be in all this mix. All right, and there was one other thing. Doesn't matter. Let's rock and roll. Okay. Something's still doing it. There we go. Nope. What is echoing? All right.
From Answers in Genesis, it says,
Good.
read the following tweet from Answers in Genesis. It says, Christians must have a biblical worldview that they apply to everything. Now, the problems with this statement are manifold. But first of all, let's just note that this kind of statement is very common among Protestant fundamentalism, conservative evangelicalism. We're talking about having a quote unquote biblical worldview that one applies to everything.
Yo.
Now, the problems with this statement are manifold. But first of all, let's just note that this kind of statement is very common among
Checking for echo.
Now, there are multiple problems with this. First of all, is how does one apply a biblical worldview literally to everything? That is, to every decision one might make. For example, as I said in a responding tweet, you're choosing whether to buy Coke or Pepsi. How does a biblical worldview, whatever that may be, how does that inform whether you should drink Coke or Pepsi? How does it help you decide whether to wear a particular dress, a blue or green dress, or a blue or green suit, or what have you, to a special event? How does it help you decide whether to go ahead with the picnic if the weather forecast is a 30% chance of precipitation?
No, I'm just going to say that I was listening to this about Jonathan Pagro right now on, what's his name? Wise Disciple. Well, Wise Disciple wasn't understanding this either. This is not hard to understand. Part of religion is its practicality. It's how useful it is in real life. If it's not useful, that becomes a problem. And I don't understand how people don't get that. I really don't. There should be no problem understanding that. So yeah, I don't get that. I don't understand how, as a Christian who lives out the faith, you don't understand that the practicality of the faith is part of what makes the faith reliable. If you were believing in God, but there was no practicality, there was no heaven, there was no afterlife, there was no God, there was no, if you do these things will then happen. If there was no consequence, I don't just mean eternal, I mean like practical everyday consequences. What are you believing in? If God's not the creator of the universe, what are you believing in? If you don't define God, and this is important from Tertullian, if you don't define God as the creator, if you don't have a definition of God that works, what are you believing in? So, Wise Disciple, for some reason, and a lot of Protestants, for some reason, don't get this. And Ronda Rousey is addressing it perfectly.
Or a 50% chance of precipitation, or a 70% chance of precipitation. The examples are endless where the Bible as such does not inform how we ought to think about or act on a specific issue. So what this says to me right there is that this is simply a particular pietism run amok. It is a way of absolutizing one's professed adherence.
One. One. Hmm. Okay. Nope. One. 1, 2. There we go. Hmm. Okay. 1, 2. 1, 2. Checking that the sound is still coming through, and I didn't turn off the mic. Okay. Perfect. And again, this is what Jonathan Pagwo was talking about with his debate with, it wasn't Bernanke, it was someone else. I'm probably going to do that video next week, or if I do another stream tomorrow to make up for the one that I missed this week, we'll talk about it then. But basically, the worldview of Christianity does matter. And you're looking at different worlds. These are different worlds, different ways of structuring reality. And the way that you structure reality in Christianity and in Judaism and in Islam is a specific way. Now, you can argue about the differences within those contexts, but when you're in the Judo Christian tradition, or in this case, the Judo Christian Islamic tradition, when you're in an Abrahamic faith, you have a monotheistic way of viewing the world. And then you can argue about the nuances all you want. Protestant versus Catholic, Muslim versus Christian, whatever. You can have these, Orthodox versus Reformed in Judaism, Judaism versus Islam, Islam versus Christianity. You can mix it up any way you want. But at the end of the day, it is a specific worldview to have this one God that you worship. And it is what we mean by God, the creator of the universe. That means that all understandings of God are looking at the same data and coming up with different interpretations. And the closer you are to being right is the closer you are to having the whole truth. And the further away you are from being right, I mean, the further away you are from the one true God, the less correct you are. So that is a very important nuance that is missed a lot. So that's why Christians call Revelation the final, or why they call it the apocalypse, the final revelation, because it's the final reinterpretation of it. Everything else is not a reinterpretation, but just an interpretation, just an understanding. So that is the whole point of Revelation being the final, or the book of the apocalypse being the final revelation, and the apocalypse of John being renamed Revelation is troublesome because of the way the language works. It's better to call it the apocalypse because what it's doing is that it's the final reinterpretation of all the previous texts. So that's the final lens that we look through. If you don't have that, you don't have a univocal voice. And then you have Dan McKellen's problem where you're trying to look to a future text and look to a past text and trying to decide which text interprets which and which interpretation is the correct interpretation. You get into a Dan McKellen problem. And that's a video I will make as well. Probably it's a topic video, actually. Which I know I'm not doing topic weekly videos anymore, but I do think I will do a response to Dan on one particular video. All right, let's keep going. Do we have sound from? Are we hearing?
Christian worldview. Christian worldview is not less than a biblical worldview, but it's more than a biblical worldview. We find, for example, the seeds for a doctrine of incarnation, atonement, general resurrection, and Trinity in the New Testament documents. But those doctrines do not emerge fully formed in the New Testament. They took centuries to take form within the development of early Christian theology. The doctrine of the Trinity, for example, was culminated in doctrines expressed, for example, in the Second Ecumenical Council and the Creed of Nicaea, not the Creed of Nicaea, the Nicene Creed of 381. The Creed of Nicaea is typically considered to be the Creed of 326.
Sorry about that.
By 381, we get a creedal formulation of what Christians believe about quote unquote a doctrine of the Trinity, which simply did not exist in that same form in earlier expressions of Christianity, let alone in the first documents that formed the New Testament. Same thing when it comes to the doctrine of incarnation, which finally reached full form in terms of its articulation at the Council of Chalcedon in 451. Similar when it comes to doctrines of atonement and general resurrection and so on. These are all in seminal form in the New Testament, but these doctrines are only fully articulated in the centuries that followed the New Testament. And ultimately, as Christians, we're not called to ignore that history and just go back to what the New Testament Christians professed and believed in those earliest years. Rather, we're called to adopt and develop and embrace a fully Christian understanding of reality, which is much more than, not less than, a biblical worldview. So those are some of the problems.
I don't know how much of that you guys missed. Sorry about that.
Saying we ought to have a biblical worldview and apply that.
Okay, we're good on there anyway. And if we missed anything, I'll come back to it. All right. Let's do one quick sound test, and then I will come back into the room, and we will start the actual show with the next two videos.
To conclude, I will say that this kind of
Test, test, test.
language, which is so popular among fundamentalists and conservative evangelicals.
Test, test, test. Okay, perfect. All right, I'll be right back. I'm going to hop out of the room so I can make sure there's sound. All right, we are rocking and rolling. I'm going to turn up the volume just a little bit over here on the desktop audio. There we go. Should be good. All right, let's continue on. Bam. And this one upset me just a little bit, to be really blunt. This one really did.
Ladies and gentlemen, have you heard some positions about cultural and political issues at church that seem a little bit off, that may even contradict the Bible? Should you say anything? Is it right to call out false teachers? You know, the Apostle Paul certainly did. In fact, nearly every book of the New Testament warns against false teachers. Should you call out true brothers and sisters in Christ who are putting forth unbiblical or at best questionable positions as if they are the gospel? Well, you say, well, such as who, Frank? Who would be doing this? Well, there have been some very prominent evangelical leaders who say that clear biblical teachings on life, on marriage, on sexuality, and gender are unclear, while claiming that their personal positions on debatable issues such as climate change, immigration.
So his framing here is complete and utter bullshit. I like him for the way that he engages atheists. I like him for what he does on his apologetics front. But he is not an honest man. And what he's framing right now is not the actual situation. And while he's very clever, that doesn't mean that he's knowledgeable. And if he's knowledgeable on one topic, that doesn't mean that he's smart. And so he might be knowledgeable in one sense and intelligent in another way. But what he's speaking on, he doesn't know enough about. And it shows. So I don't know if it's an overconcentration in the Bible, which means he's ignorant of other things, or if it's simply he doesn't have a large knowledge base. I don't know. But while speaking on the Bible, he's very impressive. And when speaking on anything else, it becomes obvious where his blind spots are. And you're going to see that in this video. I got halfway through the video and I had to stop because of how upset I got, but I was like, I'm going to save it for the show. So here we go.
And vaccines are gospel. And if you don't agree with them, somehow you're not loving their neighbor. Well, some of these folks have been called out in a new book. It's, by the way, now a New York Times bestseller book, just came out today as a New York Times bestseller by Megan Basham. As you know, this book is called Shepherds for Sale, How Evangelical Leaders Traded the Truth for a Leftist Agenda. Now, since this book came out last week, some leaders who have been called out in the book, or some people that support those leaders, have claimed that Megan is either telling lies or taking these people.
He means Gavin Ortland. He doesn't mean some. He means one. He means one guy.
People out of context. So the question is, what is the truth? How does Megan respond to this? Well, she's going to tell you on this show, and we're going to take your questions. But before we do, let me mention that we just did 2 podcasts with Megan this past week, the I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist podcast. So if you want to listen to those, if you want to know more of what's in the book and why you should get the book and read it for yourself rather than take the word of people who are reviewing it without reading it. Most of you may know that Megan is a reporter for the Daily Wire. That's Ben Shapiro's organization. And her new book right here, I think, blows the lid off why leaders may be straying from the word of
God. We'll get into the fallacies and the illogical reasoning, faulty reasoning that he's dealing with in a few minutes.
God for money, power, or some combination thereof. Now, also joining us tonight will be my friend and colleague, Elisa Childers, who knows much more than I do about progressive Christianity, which is certainly related to our...
And by the way, progressive Christianity and liberation theology and Catholicism are very closely related. They're not the same thing, but they are very much twins separated by time, if that makes any sense. Sort of like 1950s, 1920s wokeness, reincarnated in modern woke Christianity or progressive Christianity. So we're going to get into that as well. This is going to be some good stuff. So hopefully people are watching today.
Our topic tonight. Before we get into this sensitive issue, I want to pray. Father, we thank you. You've given us the ability to reach out to so many people on social media, on these platforms. Help us now as we look at what might be controversial issues to some people, to be clear, to be truthful, And we don't want to take anybody out of context. We want to make sure we're being truthful. But most importantly, we want to make sure that people are being truthful about you and what you've told us to do. So help us to be clear and charitable at the same time in the name of Jesus who came to save us. Amen. Well, let me start with you, Megan. It's great to see you again. I just saw you last week, and I know it's been a hectic week. And our mutual friend Elisa is with us. But let me start with you. What have people been saying about the book, both good and bad?
Well, on the good side of the ledger, I have a lot of people saying, yes, you are expressing what I've been feeling, what
Paranoia and delusion? Yes.
I experienced, but I hadn't put words to. And so you hear a lot of gratitude from readers who are saying, this not only resonates with my experience, it explains my experience and explains why a church that I trusted or
Mentally ill people connecting with each other. Christianity with apologetics. This is not good advertisement for us, guys. As a Christian, this is not good advertisement. This is not good representation. I put under his video, I commented earlier today on this video, I commented directly. I said, illogical and fallacious reasoning is not faith. And the lack of wisdom is not the fear of God. And I hold to that.
church leaders that I once had complete faith in suddenly started to do things that made me feel uncomfortable, like it wasn't just aligning with what I knew Scripture taught. And so I've heard a lot of that. And then on the other side of the aisle, I have heard a whole lot of complaints from people, sometimes in extremely minor positions who have taken, maybe a sentence about them.
By the way, that might not be obvious to you, but that's a diss. That's a complete diss and insult to Gavin. She's calling him insignificant and not important, and she'll do it multiple times. She don't like the man.
Or a couple of pages.
I love you, Gavin. You want to become a Catholic? Just call me. We'll get you in the Catholic Church. Don't worry the evangelicals reject you. Come to us. Come to the Catholic side. We have cookies. Literally. And wine.
And there's a lot of complaints from those people and from some of their fans saying, well, you took them out of context, or you gave a citation that doesn't fully explain what this person's comments were. I've gotten that a lot on J.D. Greer. So a lot of what I would call hair splitting over what the quotes that I use are and who I feature. And one interesting complaint has been,
Hi, let me slander you, but don't defend yourself, because that's just taking me out of context. Well, I take you completely out of context and destroy your career. It's like she works for Kotaku.
About the title. So it seems like a lot of people, a lot of church leaders who had no problem understanding nuance, who frequently talk about nuance, suddenly don't have any nuance when it comes to this title. They don't seem to understand that a title can be both figurative and literal. So it may refer to organizations and leaders actually taking.
Can we quote that for her on the Bible? Did you know that the Bible can both be figurative and literal? Did you? Did you? Did you know?
Funding from left-wing secular foundations, but it could also be figurative in the sense of someone is maybe compromising for the sake of secular media adulation. So suddenly people don't really seem to understand that.
Or maybe they're not compromising at all. Maybe that really is their opinion. Maybe they really do believe in climate change. Maybe they really do trust vaccines. Maybe they really do believe in science and still believe in God. And maybe you are an ignorant person. Or completely biased and, I forgot the word. There's another word for that. I'll get into it later.
Frank's mute.
Oh, sorry. This is live, folks. Sometimes I mess up totally. I was going to say, what is the main thesis of the book? If you had to put it in a couple of sentences, what would it be?
So the main thesis of the book is that what we are seeing is really a generation of church leadership in very large ministries, really high-profile names and pastors who have started to promote various progressive policies, either because they are actively getting involved with left-wing foundations, or they're being influenced by left-wing media and cultural.
Yeah, no, maybe they just believe in science and like the science. And maybe they're not ignorant. Maybe they're educated. Maybe they read a lot. Maybe it's not at all a conspiracy. Maybe you're just ignorant.
Approval, or they're the of people further down the food chain who may not even sometimes realize it, that they are being influenced by some of these much more powerful actors. And that's changing what they talk about in terms of biblical morality as it intersects with politics. And it's causing them in many ways to suddenly be ashamed of areas where the Bible has total clarity.
Elisa, let me bring Elisa Childers in. Elisa, you have really become an expert on this idea of progressive Christianity, and I think much of this is related to the topic that we're talking about today, particularly Megan's book. When you read the book, how did it resonate with you?
Well, it's just like Megan said in the opening, it made sense of things that I had been seeing for years. So just to give a little context of my perspective on this, I, in 2019, wrote a book about progressive Christianity, my experience of having a faith crisis through the progressive church. And when I was thinking about progressive Christianity in the beginning and I was researching it, I realized today that I was approaching it just from a purely theological perspective. So my first book really just deals with mostly the theology of progressive Christianity. But then when COVID hit and the events surrounding the death of George Floyd happened and the riots and all of this stuff going on in culture, and I saw some of the people that I consider to be theologically sound, biblically solid, biblical worldview, start to adopt progressive talking points, and particularly the ones that I noticed were surrounding COVID issues and turning things like getting a vaccination into a gospel issue. Like, this is how we are to be good neighbors. This is what you have to do as a Christian. These morally binding language to do these types of things that really should be a matter of conscience for each individual Christian. Agreeing with the extended shutdowns of churches when you had strip clubs that were open and bars that were open, and cooperating. And I was seeing these leaders cooperate with some of these things, and it really I could not figure out what was going on because.
So during the Black Plague, Catholic priests had your attitude, and we lost many, many lines of apostolic succession because of it. There's only like 3 lines left. There used to be 12 lines, more if you think about the 700, or the 72, sorry, 700. If you think about the 72, there were more lines of apostolic succession. Now there's only like 2 or 3. That's how many priests died because they had the attitude that you had about the Black Plague. That's why this time around, when there was a pandemic, the Catholic Church told priests to wear a mask, to limit the size of masks, to make sure the parishioners wear a mask when they're inside the church, to encourage the parishioners to get vaccinations, and to do outreach to get vaccinations to homeless people and those who couldn't get to vaccinations. Because we wanted to prevent an outbreak because of how bad the consequences were the last time we didn't listen to the science.
I thought, the litmus test for this is theology, right? It's like, do you believe the gospel? And so
God wants you to care for the sick and injured, not to get them killed. So yes, you're still following the gospel. God wants you to care for the planet. Your job, your task as a worker for God, as a slave for God, as his servant, is to care for the planet. So yes, caring for the planet includes caring about the environment. That's part of it. Does that mean that the leftist or progressive solutions are the right solutions? No, that doesn't mean that. But it doesn't mean they're the wrong ones either. And it also doesn't mean that theologically it's wrong to care about these things.
So when I saw otherwise, theologically sound leaders that were a part of these big platforms telling Christians that they had to believe these certain things and adopt the narrative of even systemic racism without any discussion, just like, this is what it is, we have to adopt this, and we have to repent of this, and we have to talk about things like white privilege and lamenting and all of these things. And there wasn't a discussion. It wasn't like you could bring your opinion and there was...
Partisan. She's partisan. She's biased and she's partisan. Both these women are.
There was any kind of conversation. It was like, this is morally binding. So it just didn't make sense to me. I couldn't figure it out. And then I saw Megan's article that came out about the leaders that had been sort of doing these talking points of Francis Collins and all of these surrounding the COVID. And that's when things really started to make sense for me. So I've been eagerly awaiting her book to kind of make some of those connections. And that's what it really did for me.
Well, it's very well researched, and it covers the biggest topics of the day. And so I thought it was great, and that's why we did 2 podcasts on it. But there are some naysayers. So before we get into the naysayers, maybe, Elisa, can you describe what Big Eva is and who coined the term?
Right. So if people are kind of unfamiliar with all of the back and forth and the things that have been going on, it's really hard to follow all of it because we all have an algorithm. We all have things that are going to be pushed into our feeds. You have to really go looking for things. And I've been following it as closely as I'm able to. But it seems to me like what we are seeing is what we call Big Eva sort of becoming uncovered by what Megan has exposed. And what that has caused is, I think, kind of like a moral panic among a bunch of these evangelical leaders who, as Megan said, might just be downstream from the thing. Maybe there's a pastor out there who listens to the podcast from.
Again, what if they're just right? What if they came to this opinion on their own? They're not being paid off. They're not being brainwashed. It's not a vast conspiracy. What if they just think you're wrong and the other side on this one particular issue is correct? Or three particular issues. They haven't quit believing in God. They haven't quit believing in Jesus. They haven't quit believing in whatever it is that you believe religiously. But they just disagree with you politically. Maybe you're just not right. Maybe you're wrong. Or maybe you just disagree and it's not a religious issue.
From the Gospel Coalition or some of these other big platforms, and maybe they adopted some of these talking points.
Maybe it's not the devil. Maybe it's just two people having a different opinion.
And now that it's been exposed, they're thinking, well, gosh, if I recognize that I did that, then I'm going to be called a wolf or a false teacher. And I just hope that if there's any pastors watching, and maybe you were downstream from some of that stuff, it's beautiful to just repent, to just say, look, I bought into some of this stuff. It doesn't mean you were a shepherd for sale. It doesn't mean you were on anybody's payroll. You might have just been trusting your leaders, right? And this is something that you can repent from. I've done that. I've repented, even on air, of ideas and ideologies that I inadvertently didn't realize that had made its way into my language. I've done that on my podcast a couple times. It's beautiful and freeing to repent. So I want to speak to those too. This isn't like Megan said, like there is nuance that we can apply. It's like not everybody who bought into this.
Yeah, ask them to repent. Yeah, you're not making a religious issue out of this either. Yeah. Yeah. Ask them to repent. Again, they don't have to repent for disagreeing with you. You're not God.
Is, not a bad Christian or a false teacher. But Big Eva is a term that was coined actually by Carl Trueman in 2018. And I've got his article up here, and the article is called What Big Eva Is and Why It Matters to Reformed Churches. Now, the context of this was Revoice and the Side B conversation, which is a whole other thing. And well, it's actually connected to what Megan's talking about. But he says basically it's his term for the network of large evangelical organizations and conferences that seeks to shape the thinking and strategy of American evangelical churches. And then he goes on and he says it's a populist movement of tremendous influence and minimal accountability. It provides identity for its most passionate, and I can't even pronounce this word because Carl Trueman is really smart, acolytes, because it promises to reward, and this is the important part, it promises rewards to individuals and organizations, influence, students, platform. It is both very hard to criticize and functionally unaccountable to any but its own. And so what we're seeing is these big Eva platforms that are not all bad, right? They produce some really great content. There are some really wonderful theologians that have produced some really wonderful content that are affiliated with some of these big Eva platforms. I've written for a couple of these big Eva platforms. It's not all bad. But generally speaking, the powers that be, the higher you go, it's sort of like if you toe the line and you repeat the talking points, you will be, it seems to me, and I think this is easy to observe, you can get on their platform and you can be platformed more. And so people's sort of well-being as far as the traction they're going to gain with their ideas can become connected to towing the line to some of the talking points that Big Eva has decided is the way Christians are supposed to think about things. And so that's really who is pushing back on Megan, because she's really lifted the lid off of the thing and kind of exposed. And I had no idea, by the way, when I started seeing that some of these things, that there was radical secular progressives that were funding some of this, not all. And that's where, people are just blowing so many things out of proportion. If somebody's name is listed in Megan's book, it doesn't necessarily mean she thinks you're not a Christian or a false teacher or a wolf or something like that. You might just be an example of somebody downstream from some of the higher ups where you might have caught something that you began teaching that came from some of these, higher up things of the Big Eva platforms.
Megan, can you just give us...
Can I jump in there really quick? And I would love.
No, this is not about you. Forget it.
I would love to read just a quick passage from the book that demonstrates that. I think it's in our clip 11. That, in fact, I make this very point in the introduction. If you can indulge me, I'll read it and tell you what I said. So it says this, and this is in the introduction, even before we get to chapter 1. There is a reason the book of Jude urges all Christians, not just pastors, to contend for the faith and to be on the lookout for those who secretly slip in among us, dividing us by distorting the clear teaching of the word for their own ends. Some are, yes, wolves, unfaithful pastors and teachers, deliberately leading the sheep astray. I believe that you'll have little trouble pinpointing in these pages.
Notice that what she's saying isn't any better than what she says she's not saying. It's still completely insulting, still completely demoralizing, and still saying that the Bible itself is against you.
who they are. But there are different degrees of error. Passivity, fear of reprisal, and plain old lack of discernment are also reasons that pastors may compromise with the culture. For those who are not outright wolves, forthright, brotherly confrontation, such as when Paul opposed Peter over those who wanted to add Jewish custom to God's grace in Galatians 2, may bring about sincere repentance. And we should take heart in knowing that ours is hardly the first era to necessitate unpleasant conflict. So I don't know how I could have been more clear that I was not about to call every single person who I quoted or who I analyzed in this book a wolf. I actually took great pains to say I am not doing that. And just kind of a little background story on this title that has gotten so much attention is originally we had titled it Evangelicals for Rent because it came out of a secular foundation that is funded by people like George Soros and Bill Gates had produced this report.
Yeah, the devil, Bill Gates.
A foundation called a think tank called New America had produced this report on how they tried to co-opt evangelicals to get onto the climate change bus. And they specifically said that they were looking to the rent an evangelical model, which meant that they wanted to harness the influence of some high-profile, well-known evangelical leaders to try to get them to use their influence to sway the ordinary people in the pews. But, after a lot of discussion with the editors, we kind of went, even though we're taking that directly out of this report, rent an evangelical is a little bit of a mouthful and a little bit confusing. So we
Pastors for Sale is just as many words.
decided to simplify it to Shepherds for Sale. And that is why I put that passage right there in the introduction so that there would be no confusion about what I was saying.
Well, people would actually have to read the book to know that, Megan.
There is
See, that's part of the problem. You actually have to read the book. I don't know how many reviews I've seen. Haven't read the book, but here's why she's wrong. Okay, well, friends.
They won't read.
I am busy reading the Church Fathers, and I'm busy reading the Book of Mormon, and I'm busy reading recommendations from Dan and Kip. So I am busy. I've been reading scholarly books. I've been reading Church Father books. I don't have time for this nonsense, so I'm just going with the gist. But it ain't good. I've heard Gavin's side completely. I've heard these people talk about it.
Read the book because of some of the.
Let's see. Mr. No Evolution. He doesn't believe in evolution. Mrs. Doubtfire. And Mrs. Everyone who doesn't believe in my type of Christianity is not a Christian. Okay.
Pushback they've seen, they refuse to.
Bias. Apologist. Propagandist. Don't know. Useful idiot. Well-meaning fool. Someone's grandpa.
Read it. And that kind of proves Megan's point that so many Christians are just sort of blindly obeying these platforms, but they're not even willing to read it for themselves.
Well, let's get specific now. Who, that you mention in the book, has objected publicly to what you have written?
Well, obviously anybody who has been on YouTube. Or
Gavin Ortland, Gavin Ortland, Gavin.
or Twitter has probably noticed that the big pushback has largely come from Gavin Ortland, the YouTube apologist. And I don't know his work very well, but a couple
I've only been arguing with him for years, but I don't know him very well.
of years ago, he and I had a little bit of, I won't say contentious, but maybe a bit of a spirited exchange on Twitter about climate change.
Reputation destruction is the weapon of the feminine mind, according to psychology. Example and point.
And if I remember correctly, Christianity Today, someone at Christianity Today, I think news editor Daniel Silliman, had posted his climate change video. And don't quote me on that because I'm just going back in my memory here, but if I remember right, that's what happened. And I saw the video and I interacted with it on Twitter, and then we had a little bit of a spirited exchange, which basically encapsulates what I went into in the book. And so for about 4.5 pages.
Somebody had an opinion I disagree with, so I wrote a book. Listen to ways that I'm ignorant to prove my point.
After showing how so many of these left-wing foundations have been deliberately pumping money into evangelical front groups.
How dare a Christian be left-wing? How dare a Christian agree with Democrats? That's impossible. except for all the Christians that vote Democrat and are left wing or progressive throughout history, including ancient times. Hmm.
In order to harness the power of seminaries and high-profile leaders, that their aim was to see that influence trickle down, and that they hoped it would create sort of a grassroots impact. And Gavin's video, which comes very late in that chapter, that I dissect for a few pages.
For a few pages, but I didn't pay attention to it. I don't know much about his work. But for a few pages, I shit on him and tell you why he's, I don't know, a useful idiot and a pawn of Satan.
Was my example of how they have been successful at having that impact. So he was actually not an example of somebody who is for sale, though there are certainly some people for sale in that chapter. He was an example.
Oh, you mean he's principled and doesn't agree with you, so therefore he's still wrong and evil, just a useful idiot. But at least he has principles, unlike me, who's on this show shitting on him for money, even though there's science that disproves everything I'm saying. But let's not worry about that.
Example of somebody who is in the environment that they created, and that is talking about this subject within the...
No. You don't believe in environmental change caused by humans. So therefore, he can't be in an environment created by man. That would be impossible. It's almost as if what you just said and what it means is metaphor for something else. But since you don't believe in metaphor and the Bible's literal, therefore you have to take your words as literal as possible. So therefore you're actually talking about the environment when talking about Gavin, because if the Bible can't be nuanced, neither can you.
The parameters that they deliberately tried to set up. So it seemed like a really good example. And so, yes, I discussed this video, dissected it, explained why I thought...
Kevin Ortland, I love you. Don't worry about this person. I'll protect you. I'll protect you, baby boy.
It did not cover all of the scientific angles that it should, and why I didn't think it covered all of the theological considerations that I thought it should. And that was it. I have been a little shocked at how much attention it's gotten.
You accused what is now one of the biggest apologists on YouTube of being a fraud and a sellout and of misleading people. Yeah, it got a lot of attention. Heard about Mr. Beast lately?
Because it is such a very tiny part of the book, and in some ways, whether on purpose or just coincidentally, it has been frustrating to watch such a minor figure who I make no serious allegations about, other than, hey, I want to disagree with this public content you created, that has completely stolen the focus off of people who I really do believe did some...
Every time that she does this, you got to take a drink. And for those of you who suffer from liver problems, I'm sorry.
Nefarious things.
Now, as you say, there's a few pages about Gavin, and I don't know Gavin personally. I know he does apologetics.
You were kissing his ass just a few videos ago, and now you're going to shit on him? Wow. Welcome to the girls club, buddy. All right. Take your V card. You're welcome in the club. It's pink.
A couple videos I've seen of him I thought were very good, but I don't know him personally. But he really objects to one particular sentence.
Reputation destruction is the weapon of the feminine mind, according to psychology.
It's on page 26.
Should I say it a third time?
It says to not accept that consensus, because he has talked about... in fact, why don't we play the clip, Jorge, of him...
He plays a clip in his showing that this is not what's going on, and they're going to play a clip saying that it is what's going on. I don't care enough about these people to go into that. But one day, if enough people respond to this video does well, this stream does well, I'll watch the two original videos that are mentioned, the Christian magazine or whatever it was, and Gavin Ortland's original video. I've watched his subsequent videos, but the original one, I'll go and watch that one, the one from before he was Gavin Ortland, back when he was Truth Unites or whatever it was, his channel beforehand, when he was Shma YouTuber.
Claiming that there is a consensus on this issue. I think it's clip 5. Let's play that.
Oh, rugged, manly Gavin Ortland. That's the man. That guy right there. Look at that. Look at that handsome guy. Tall, got the stubble going on. For some reason, the roots don't match the highlights, but let's not worry about that. Let's not worry. Let's give a man his dignity. Let him have the hair dye, the Just for Men. He's got the books that he's never read. I got the books that I've never read. You don't think we really read these? We're YouTubers. It's a prop. There's nothing in there. They're empty. They're empty pages. They're blank. He's got the Encyclopedia Britannica over here, the World Encyclopedia over here. These are draw along, paint along. You know, there's the paint by numbers. That's what they are. They're the paint by number books. There we go. This is, I don't know, nature science. Let's see. He's got the same lamp that I have in another room, so we clearly shop at the same place. Good on you, Gavin. And maybe that's a chair. I'm not really sure. An ottoman of some kind. I don't know what that is. Yeah. Oh, what happened? Play.
Number one, it's just good to observe, first of all, that there is pretty much a scientific consensus, or
Hold on. Let me. About there. So it's pretty clear to say that there is some kind of scientific consensus. Observe, first of all, that there is pretty much a scientific consensus. I can't do it. His face is too serious.
very close to a scientific consensus on human-caused climate change as a very real problem. And this is, again, the appeal and just the burden I have when people are dismissive towards this. If you're going to go against a near consensus...
You know, they're going to go after him in a second on the fact that he also believes in evolution, which thank you, Gavin, for believing in evolution. You help the Christians very much. As a fellow Christian who also believes in evolution, I appreciate you. I know I'm being a little funny today, but in all seriousness, I appreciate you a lot. And then Frank Turek will make a fool out of himself on that issue in just a second.
Consensus in the scientific community. Don't just shoot from the hip, study it and make sure that that's a wise thing to do, because I see a lot of people reacting instinctively rather than really hitting the books. And I don't think that that's a responsible posture for Christians to take.
Agreed.
He goes on to say at that point that, you may come to a different conclusion, but you ought to study it. But then there's another clip a little bit later in the video, about 6 minutes later, where he talks about the consensus. And if you disagree with the consensus, the bigger conspiracy is you believing that all these scientists got together and created this conspiracy and hoax. That would be harder to believe than just believing there really was a consensus. Let's play that one. That is.
And consensus changes over time. And consensus doesn't make something correct. It just means it's the consensus. But the consensus could be convincing. And maybe he was convinced. That's not a conspiracy. And that doesn't mean that the information's bad. It just means you disagree with the information because you somehow think that believing in evolution or believing in science or believing in man-caused anything somehow takes away from God or makes the Bible untrue. And you're the problem, not the secular scholar who's pointing out these issues. The secular scholar can point out as many facts as you want. Your faith being so weak that something that is illogical has to be true for you to still believe in God, that's on you. That's not on God, and that's not on the devil, and that's not on the secular scholar who's pointing out a simple fact. If you can't handle someone who's just playing word games and logic games with you, and that's enough to break your faith, then you didn't have real faith to begin with. That's a quote from Nietzsche.
Number 7, Jorge.
Jorge? Didn't he change? Did he change guys? I thought his name's... Does he have migrant workers working for him? For clips? Wow. Oh, that's amazing.
I think when I first studied this, if I'm remembering this correctly, from
Jorge. He has my cousin working for him.
2007 on, every other scientific body of national or international...
Hey, Choche, let me ask you a question, okay? You're Hispanic, I'm Hispanic. You both know you should be Catholic. What are you doing working for Frank Turek? Be honest.
standing agrees that human-caused global warming is a serious problem. So
Viva la raza.
the level of conspiracy and hoax it would be if somehow all of these different people think that scientists are all together. People have this distrust of science.
Let me just say something about this. I'm not sure that Gavin is tuned in to what really goes on.
Gavin is a million times more tuned in than you are. And I want to be clear. I don't think Gavin's the greatest representative of science or science and Christianity meshing together. I think Jimmy Akin's much better at that. But, or any of the popes who also have degrees in, I don't know, medicine, biology, whatever have you. The bishops, the people who are astrophysicists and also bishops and cardinals. Maybe they have a better, stronger understanding on this. But I digress. Do you think that all the Christian apologists who talk against evolution also failed high school biology? It's just a question.
In the scientific community, it's not all objective as you think. Science doesn't say anything, scientists do. And the only example, the counter example of what I can give to him, if he's suggesting that it's
Apparently, Frank Turek in high school never did a class experiment.
the scientific consensus, therefore it must be true, is macroevolution, which is, oh yeah, there is a scientific consensus. It's because philosophically, they've ruled out the only other possibility, and they will not allow people like Stephen.
A, there are more than one possibility. B, any theory on evolution or hypothesis is well tested, and the theory of evolution or the hypothesis around it does change over time. It's not as if the theory has stayed the same from its first proposal, from its first hypothesis, from its first writing down to what it is now. But again, you can do this. You can do microevolution. You can do this with fish. You can do this with shrimp. You can do this with any animal whose lifespan is very short. You can do it with plants. There's no missing link.
Meyer and Doug Axe and Jonathan Wells and
There's no missing link. There's only more information.
Scholars who have a different view in their little clique of peer-reviewed journals. They just won't allow them. And then they say, well, you're not peer-reviewed, so you can't be correct.
You know what? You know what? I don't have a degree or in biology in any kind of way. Let me write a paper explaining my understanding of biology and evolution, and then let me get it peer reviewed, and let's see how many takers I get. Where'd you go to school? YouTube. What do you know about evolution? I graduated high school and college, so I have an associate's in philosophy and humanities in the arts. I'm a licensed insurance agent and licensed small loan officer. So I'm certified in Hyundai. Who's ready to peer review my opinion? Who's ready? Frank Turek, your ass on stupido.
So because people say there's a scientific consensus does not mean what they're saying is true. And I think, unfortunately, Gavin might be a little naive to that fact. Here is what he objects to, Megan. This sentence, which is on page 26, to not accept that consensus.
And I would be clear, I'm not doing the Dan McKellen thing or the Kip Davis thing where I'm so arrogant that someone has to have a degree to be intelligent. There's, I don't know if you watched the video that I did on the British Museum of Archaeology or Fine Arts or something like that. And it was the creator corner of, I think, of a cuneiform tablet or of ancient Assyria or something like that. And a volunteer who just simply attended courses, who apparently may or may not even have a degree in anything, but just really studied hard and worked hard and understood the facts, made a major discovery that changed our understanding of ancient history, of ancient cuneiform script. That's not so. It's not. I'm not saying that you have to have a degree to make a great contribution, but you have to have an understanding of the facts. And Frank Turek and the people that he mentioned do not have an understanding of the facts as they lay on the ground and are understood today. That doesn't mean it's impossible for them to be right. But based on the current data, their reasoning is faulty. They could be guessing the right answer, but they're getting there in the wrong way. People used to believe the earth was the center of the universe. And they were basing it on the best science they had. Until the science changed, until people started realizing, nope, we're wrong. So, yes, consensus can change. But you still have to use good reasoning. There's a reason why the first heliocentric models failed and were rejected. It isn't because they were wrong, it's because the way they were getting to the answer wasn't right. So if you're going to say microevolution is wrong, you have to prove that. If you're going to say that evolution doesn't exist, you have to prove it. And then you're going to have to argue about how is it that we can replicate evolutionary processes in a lab or in a stream. How can we do that if evolution isn't real? How can we duplicate evolutionary processes and results if it's not real?
He says, you're saying Gavin says, is to buy into conspiracy and hoax. It is a failure to take a responsible posture as a Christian. And you've just...
Yeah, that's not a religious statement or a worldview or a condemnation. That totally is. You're condemning him. You're calling him a liar.
Having quotes, conspiracy and hoax, and also, in quotes, take a responsible posture. And you're taking that from two different clips in this longer 30-minute video. How do you respond to that?
Well, one, I kind of laughed at the notion that I think it was framed as a little trick that I do, and not something that you will see in every single newspaper and magazine published every single day all across America. It's not a special Megan Basham trick.
That doesn't make it a good thing. Taking someone out of context doesn't make it a good thing. It doesn't matter if everybody else does it. You're a Christian. You're supposed to stand for... Oops, I'm just about to lose sound. Hot dog it. Hold on. Give me a second. Damn. Give me a second. Well, I set up sound for my... Okay. Just as I was flowing. All right. I'm going to let her play while I get rid of my headset. I'll be right back.
What journalists routinely do to try to condense a long bit of material and just say, here's the general summary of what the tenor is of this particular speech or conversation or interview. So it was a little ridiculous to suggest that was something unique to me. And I understand that he objects to me just taking a couple of phrases, but when you look at the totality of the video, I don't know how you could come to any other conclusion. It really does not present any other possible conclusion you would reach if you are hitting the books. The assumption is if you're hitting the books and you're doing the homework, then you will agree with the scientific consensus. And not just that, there's also a negative framing, which is if you don't agree with that scientific consensus, excuse me, what you're going to do, you're doing that because you have been captured by a socio-political outlook. And it might be worth playing that clip as well, because, I think when you look at these clips, they are a bit more pointed than those that have been circulating. And the one I'm thinking of is that clip number 9.
I don't think we have 9. Are you, the socio-political associations, is that what you mean?
Yeah, socio-political associations.
That's clip number 3. If we could play that, Jorge, play that one. Clip number 3.
Coming up.
All right. And then I want to get Elisa's take on this. Go ahead. Go ahead, Gavin.
Hold on, I'm making sure this is the right one.
All right, yeah, it should be number 3.
And to be clear, there are actually...
Did he change names? Did he change names? Go ahead, Gavin.
Hold on, I'm making sure this is the right one.
All right, yeah, it should be number 3.
And to be clear, there are actually 2. So
yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Gavin.
Is it Gavin or is it Jorge? Is it my cousin Choche or not? Viva la raza, mi brother. Mi primo. Mika.
Hold on, I'm making sure this is the right one.
All right, yeah, it should be number 3.
And to be clear, there are actually 2. So there is the clip number 3, which is the one where he says it's, or at least on my list, a basic idea of climate change is commonsensical because of an explosion in human population.
commonsensical.
And then also one that says, if you are skeptical of this climate change consensus, it's probably because you have been influenced by your socio-political outlook, and that evangelicals tend to be conservatives.
All right, so let's play this.
Here we go.
Get to the point here on this first point. I'm just deeply burdened that many people come to this super strong opinion about climate change, just as they do on other social and cultural issues, without having studied it. Not based on the evidence, but based on the socio-political associations of the issue. I think that is a massive problem.
You know what? I lied to you. I have watched this video of Gavin's before. And I think I'm underneath in the comments talking about how much I love him for this video. So, yeah.
Go ahead, Megan.
Well, so I would say, both in framing it in a positive sense, that if you're hitting the books and you're doing this studying, you are probably going, not even probably, I think it just lays it out that you're going to agree with that scientific consensus. That's the assumption there. And then on the
wait. Let's go back. She just said a thing. I'm gonna slow it down to real speed so we can hear this. Hold on.
Problem.
Go ahead, Megan.
Well, so I would say, both in framing it in a positive sense, that if you're hitting the books and you're doing this studying, you are probably going, not even probably.
So if you're studying, you're probably gonna, not even probably.
I think it just lays it out that you're going.
I think it just lays it out
agree with that scientific
that you're going to
consensus.
agree with that
That's the
scientific
assumption
consensus.
there. And then on
That's the
negative
assumption
side,
there.
if you
Does she know what she just said? Does she understand how words work, what things mean?
don't, it is probably because you are being affected by your conservative political outlook, and you're letting that overrule your open-mindedness to approach the evidence fairly.
Elisa, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, when the first video came out where Gavin was claiming he was misrepresented, I watched that whole video. And to be honest with you, I was persuaded. I went, wow, it sounds like maybe she really did misrepresent him. And so I started thinking about, all right, what does this mean? I've just interviewed her. Do I need to make an announcement? And then I thought, okay, hold on. I need to do a little bit more investigation here. So after watching Gavin's initial video, then I watched his old climate change video in its entirety. And then I went back to Megan's book and I read the section that she talks about Gavin very carefully and comparing that with what I had just seen. And at the end of that, now after I did those three things, I thought, no, actually, I think she represented him entirely accurately. Now, maybe he could quibble about the way she set up that one sentence, fine. But the spirit of her summary is exactly what was in that video.
No, it wasn't.
I will also say that Gavin did
No,
say
it
in his
wasn't.
climate change video that he's not for, diminishing the population. It's good that there's, humans are good. I'm glad he said that. But he did agree that it's the human-caused climate change, which are the climate change activism points, which was the point Megan was trying to make, is that you have people that are parroting these points of activism. And I think she made her case in the book that is what he did. And so and here's one other thing I'll say. There is he was such a small part of the book. And I understand wanting to make a video to clarify, like, hey, I was misrepresented. I get misrepresented all the time. If you're a public person, you will be misrepresented. And that's why we have, people you have a brain out there. You can watch this video and you can watch that video. You can read the book. You can compare and come to your own decision. But I personally think this whole thing is such a distraction from the main point she's trying to make and the main people that she's really trying to expose. This book is not about exposing.
Maybe you don't pick a fight with the big dog in the yard and think it's not going to have consequences. I don't know. By the way, update on the poll. Currently, the winning side is hypocrites be hypocriting. We'll check the poll out again in a little bit.
Gavin Ortland as some sort of a false teacher. I'm not deeply familiar with Gavin's work.
Why are they distancing themselves from Gavin Ortland? They were kissing his ass a few videos ago on everything, especially when he went up against Trent Horn. Now suddenly he's a bad guy because he doesn't agree with you on climate change because he thinks it might be man-made, or at least even if it's not 100% man-made, at least is partially man-made. The fact that he thinks, yeah, things we do have consequences, that's going to be reason enough to throw him out of the church. Like, what are you guys doing? Well, we don't really know him. He read a science book once. Ooh, how gross.
Really know him. We did one conversation on Unbelievable podcast a while back. That's really the only time I've ever met him, so I don't know him that well.
Look at the ugly face and look at the serious face and the ugly face happening here. Gavin Ortland. Ooh, he likes science. Ooh. Oh no. He's read a book and it wasn't the Bible. What are we gonna do?
Well, and I don't really know his material that well. Everything I've seen of his material other than this is that, there's a lot of really, really great stuff, a lot of stuff I would agree with, probably content I will go and use as a resource. So this book is not about exposing Gavin Ortland. This book is about exposing.
Then maybe don't mention him. Or maybe you mentioned him, not you, lady, because she wanted to sell a book and she knew that mentioning people that nobody cares about wouldn't sell.
Other people who are kind of quiet right now, and they're probably very happy to have this distraction.
And I think that Gavin has a very nice demeanor about him. He doesn't appear to be hostile at all. I'll give him that. And I think that technically, if you want to quibble over that sentence, you can do so. But I agree with you, Elisa. I think that the spirit of his video, the one that you put, Megan, in the book, that you were referencing in the book, I thought you did capture the spirit of it, which is essentially saying this is an important issue, because he goes on toward the end of that video and says, I think we need carbon emission reductions. This is going to be hard and all this, right? Okay, you can take that position, but to say or to intimate that this is something that is so strong that Christians have to get on board with.
Well, he didn't intimate that. He said he could be wrong, but he thinks it's something we should take seriously. And his reasoning is in line with the Bible that says that we are, with the Bible's literal command that says that we are the stewards of the earth. The Christian interpretation of the Genesis story that says that we are the stewards of the earth and therefore we are responsible to take care of it as the servants of God, as the people who, as the servants, as the slaves who are on God's property, tending his land. The Christian interpretation of who that is, God's people, yes, it is completely consistent. Does it mean that it's right? No. I think it's right because I agree with him. That doesn't make me right either. But it doesn't make it a Christian issue. It's not a, well, if you're going to care about the environment, then you're definitely not a Christian. What are you saying? That's insanity.
I think goes a little too far, because this is what I call an ends and means issue. And that is, we all want to take care of the environment. Look, a lot of people don't know.
Look at the face. Look at the face. Look at the face. You're going to turn on us. No, not now. You're going to turn on us. He secretly read a science book too. He read Nature when he was a kid and he likes animals. No! Look at that face. I killed 300 ducks yesterday and I threw them away, and then I smoked a cigarette and used some old aerosol hairspray and the pre-1970 stuff because I got to make sure that ozone is burning up.
My bachelor's degree was in environmental studies. I'm an environmentalist. I want to take care of the environment. But that doesn't mean that every single policy.
And yet you don't believe in evolution. I wonder where you got your degree from, and I wonder if you passed your classes.
That alleges to take care of the environment is a good one. And Megan, you do a wonderful job of pointing out that the Paris Accords have actually resulted in more death and destruction than climate change ever could. Speak to Ghana, I should say, and also Sri Lanka for just a minute, if you would.
Yeah, I opened.
I agree, Thomas. Duggan and Kruger effect times 3. I agree. Kruger.
In the chapter with those two examples because what they show is how this assumption that loving our neighbor.
Okay, we're already 1 hour in. Who wants to? Do you guys want to switch over to the next video? Or you guys want to finish this one out? Because if we finish this one out, we're not going to get to the next video, and I kind of want to get to the next video. I haven't seen the next video, so it'll be a live react. I think we're going to do that. So let's take let's say a 1 minute, 2 minute break. I'm going to get some water, and then we'll be back with the next video, which will be, hold on. It's the same two people. I just want to see, well, not the same two. It's Ali, whatever. We're going to have fun. Hold on. Here we go. Bam. Okay. While that's playing, let's do the intermission. I will be right back. Okay, and we are back.
Construction. What is it? Why are so many people in your life doing it? Today we've got Elisa Childers. She is an
I don't get their fear of deconstruction. It's so stupid.
author and an apologist. We love having her as a guest. She is going to break down exactly what deconstruction is and how you can push back against it. Also, how can you lovingly speak the truth to people in your life who are deconstructing their faith. Such an encouraging and educational conversation for me. I know it will be for you too. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Good Ranchers. Go to goodranchers.com. Use code Allie at checkout. Goodranchers.com, code Allie. Lisa, thanks so much for taking the time to join us again.
Oh, man. It's so great to be back with you and in person this time, which is fun.
Yes. First time meeting in person, which is sometimes hard to believe. It's sometimes hard to remember when I've crossed paths with someone so much, whether we've met in person or not. But finally, in the flesh. Yeah. Okay, I know that probably everyone listening to this, watching this, knows exactly who you are. But just in case, can you give everyone a short bio?
Yeah, yes. So I do worldview speaking and I write books, but I never thought that that was going to be my vocation because I was always in music. So I spent about 7 or 8 years in the contemporary Christian music industry as a part of the group. I almost said Spice Girls, but it's Zoe Girl.
That would be amazing.
That was like a slip.
I am talking to a Spice Girl about how she is now a Christian apologist.
That should tell you what type of a group we were because we really were like the Christian Spice Girls in 2000. So loved Jesus my whole life. Always been a Christian, very deeply devoted to Christ my whole life. life. But then as a result of going through a class at a progressive Christian church that I didn't know was progressive at the time, my faith was really rocked. I mean, this was like in my 30s after I was married and had kids. And it really brought me to the edge of agnosticism. I was so just confused about what I had believed all my life. And because the beliefs in this class were deconstructed, they were explained away, that it just propelled me into a faith crisis that was indescribably painful, agonizing, disorienting. But God in his faithfulness led me to study. So I studied for years and got.
Okay, so my sub goal up here is not updating. We should be at 1,286. I've had 29 more followers, I think, since this went up, and for some reason, it's not updating. I might have to delete it and relink it or something.
God rebuilt my faith, and I made course corrections along the way, but that's really ultimately what led me to start a podcast and a blog and write books to help other people who might be seeing some of these things in culture, and they might not have language for it, but hopefully I can help them kind of make sense of some of the crazy that we see now.
Yes. Or written, rather. I'm sure you've read plenty too, but written several books on this. Another Gospel was released in 2020. Your most recent book, The Deconstruction of Christianity, What It Is, Why It's Destructive, and How to Respond.
Let's beat that dead horse.
All of that is important, but that last part, I get a lot of questions.
Do you know the U.S. solar company's NASA?
Do you?
My cousin said this. My spouse said this. This random post on Instagram said this. How do I respond to this? Is that why you wrote this book? Because of questions you were receiving like that?
Yeah, I would say that's a huge reason, because I've been speaking about deconstruction and progressive Christianity for years, and it never really occurred to me to address that part of it. Like, now, how do you take this information and apply it? Because I was always just like, well, here's what's going on. The house is on fire. Everybody pay attention over here. And yet the number one question I would get when I go speak is, what do I specifically do in my specific relationship or my specific situation? And so we did dedicate a third of the book to that question. We wanted to give people a really practical way forward to think about how can we befriend somebody who is in deconstruction, especially when they think we're toxic and unhealthy and unsafe. You know, how do we do that sort of a thing? But I would say the second big reason that my co-author Tim and I wanted to write this book is because we just thought the way that a lot of evangelicals were talking about deconstruction was not helpful. So I've been watching this movement for probably about 14 years, since that's about when my faith crisis happened. And I actually thought that what happened to me was deconstruction. In fact, in my first book, Another Gospel, I actually used that word to describe my journey. It's the best word I had at the time. It's what I thought happened to me, because it was a really awful experience. And I always saw deconstruction as a negative thing. But then in the past 3 to 5 years, I started to see well-meaning evangelicals talk about deconstruction as if it can be a positive, healthy, good thing. And I thought, man, that's very confusing, because if you go online and you go into that hashtag, which is primarily where the movement is taking place, there's nobody in that movement that's saying, hey, keep the Bible in the forefront, you know, make sure objective truth is what you're going for, make sure you're searching for truth. So I actually changed my mind on what happened to me. I don't use the word deconstruction anymore, because even though it was years long, it was agonizing, it was painful, it was a crisis, I was always searching for truth outside of myself. I didn't want to just go with what I personally felt was healthy or unhealthy, liberating or oppressive, toxic or helpful, or whatever those words are. I wanted to know first what's true, because I don't think we can know what is toxic unless we first know what's true.
Right. So that's the distinction between what you went through. And again, just to summarize, you were part of a church. You didn't realize it was progressive at the time, but it started kind of attacking the central tenets of Christianity, of like, is the Bible true? The definition of holy sexuality, marriage, and all of
the
that.
The atonement, resurrection, all
right.
of that, yeah.
And had you questioning those things that you hadn't questioned before, but in that, you still realized that there was an authority that was higher than you, and you wanted to get closer to that.
That's right.
Whereas deconstruction says, even if it doesn't start this way, it ends this way, with I am the ultimate authority. I am the prism through which all theology has to travel, and whatever comes out, as you said, whatever I deem not toxic, whatever I deem good for me, making me happy, that is what truth is. And my truth starts to overtake the truth. That's what happens in deconstruction, right?
Yeah, that's very well put, yeah.
And then how does it start, though? Like, how does deconstruction, real deconstruction, not just what you did of questioning. How does real deconstruction typically start in someone's faith?
Yeah. Well, it can start with simply questioning. It can start with somebody maybe questioning, why do we believe that Jesus was resurrected? Or how do we know we have the right books of the Bible? How do we know the people we think wrote the Bible really wrote it? How do we know they told the truth and that they, the things they talk about really happened?
Sounds to me like you're scared of questions.
Good questions.
And those
Good
are great questions. In fact, in the book, we're really careful to say those are really good questions. And I think every Christian should be asking those questions. So it can start with that. And maybe it just kind of goes from there into other types of questions and questioning biblical sexual ethics. But one thing we point out in the book is it's not just questioning. It's a particular way people question. So if you think about you and me, I would suspect are similar, that when we ask a question, we're wanting to get to the answer. We want to know the answer. And we know that not every single question we're going to ask has a clear answer. Granted, that's great. We know that. But we're hoping to find the answer if it's there to know. But in deconstruction and in progressive Christianity, the question kind of becomes the point. It becomes the most virtuous way to live would be to find the next question. And you don't want to land. In fact, many people in the deconstruction hashtag will tell you, don't form new beliefs. If you do that, you'll just have to deconstruct those, which has to be pointed out that's a belief, but we'll put that aside for a second. So it's a particular way of questioning, and that's why I think certain kinds of questioning can lead to a deconstruction. If you're searching for truth and you're like, I want to dig into the evidence, I'm going to read some good scholarship, that's great. But in deconstruction, that's typically not the way that it's done. It's not that they're not reading scholarship, but they're reading a particular type of scholarship, the more liberal and skeptical scholarship, and they're going to be led down that path that ultimately is going to line up with their own personal thoughts and feelings. So that can be one way. Another thing that can trigger a deconstruction is abuse. Abuse is a huge conversation in the church right now, and I think that it's very confusing conversation in the deconstruction movement, because you might have one person who has legitimately been abused by a spiritual leader, and they are confused and they don't know where to turn. They don't feel safe in church, and that person has all of my compassion and empathy, and I want to help that person and get them to a safe place and hold the leaders accountable, all of that. So you have everything from that to what's a very common narrative in deconstruction, which is that being told you're a sinner is abusive. Being told that Jesus died on the cross in a sacrificial, atoning death, a bloody cross, for my sins, that's abusive. To be told that hell is a real place of punishment in the afterlife, that is considered abusive. So the assumption in the deconstruction movement is that the church is wrong about hell and sexuality and the atonement and the nature of human beings. And so because we're telling people they're sinners, that's just by nature abusive. So there's a lot of knots that have to be untied in that movement, because like I said, you might have somebody with some legitimate abuse, but then somebody who's just feels personally harmed.
I don't know. I'm just messing around with the background.
I personally think are very life-giving.
Wait. No music.
All right, first sponsor for the day is Every Life. This is America's only pro-life diaper company. They promote pro-life values. They also support all of the parents that work for them, making sure they have ample parental leave, making sure that they are financially taken care of, whether they are having biological children or adopting. They are a very family-centered company. They also donate items, resources to pregnant women in need through pro-life organizations and pregnancy centers. They've got a Buy for a Cause bundle on their site that you can purchase, and you send those resources to pregnant moms and families in need. And we use Every Life in our home. Absolutely love their diapers. They're really high quality, really good clean ingredients, and they also just work really well. Like, I don't care about the ingredients if they don't work. I don't care about what's in them unless they're effective. But thankfully, I can have peace of mind with all of those things because they work really well. And I love supporting a pro-life diaper company. If you go to everylife.com today and you use my promo code ALLIE10, you can get a 10% discount on your first order. Everylife.com, code ALLIE10. It seems to me that a common thread is LGBTQ. That I don't know if I could say that's the common starting place, but it seems to be either the starting place or where a lot of deconstructors end up. That is the most evil part of Christianity that they could never subscribe to. That homosexuality is sinful, that there is a real biological dichotomy of male and female that is not flexible, is not changeable. And you hear language like, my God would never, or I could never worship a God who fill in the blank. And it is usually that would call this sin. And within that is the big conflation between love and the affirmation of sin. And they confuse those things, I don't know, intentionally, unintentionally a lot. That if God really is love, and if I'm called to love my neighbor, then of course I'm going to affirm someone's so-called orientation or desire or identity. That seems to be the assumption of a lot of people who deconstruct. And maybe even is like the keystone of their deconstruction in a lot of cases. Is that true?
I think that's a very fair statement. In fact, I've said before, and I've gotten a lot of criticism for this, but I think it's true. I don't think I've ever heard or read or witnessed a deconstruction story where that topic didn't at least play a part.
I'm going to try something in a second.
It's not necessarily the starting point for everybody, and it's not even everybody who deconstructs maybe struggles with that. But
Okay, I get that a lot of people in the room aren't really interested in this, but I am. I'm a big believer in deconstruction, so yeah.
it's going to play a part. And I think it has so much to do with the way culture defines identity. And it so much has to do with identity because in the deconstruction movement and in culture at large, people have bought into this idea that you are your feelings, that you are who you're attracted to, you are your desires. And so, as you've pointed out many times in your books and on your podcast, you know, this idea that we're just supposed to dig down inside of ourselves and identify our deepest desires and then name those things, live them out, and then cause other people or expect other people to affirm those things about us because the assumption is that what you're going to find down there is good. And so it's sort of, it's the theological building blocks of the gospel, starting with, you know, of course, creation and God putting Adam and Eve in the garden, giving them the opportunity to do things his way or their way. Of course, they chose their way, which we have right there at the beginning, this sort of idea of the fall, where humans are sinful. We're broken. There's something wrong with us. And right then and there, I think, is where the disagreement begins.
Let's see if this
so
works.
In deconstruction, they've
Hold on,
adopted
this could be fun.
cultural idea that you shouldn't let anybody tell you that you're broken or that you're sinful or that your feelings in some way would be wrong.
Why isn't it
so
working?
there's this affirmation. And of course, this is going to play right into the LGBTQ scenario that we see playing out in culture today, that you are your sexuality. And of course, this is something that Freud really promoted and got a bunch of people to buy into. And there's other people along the way that contributed to this, but that's where we're at in our culture, is that you really are your sexuality. That's your core identity. So for the deconstructionist, when the Christian says homosexuality is sinful or homosexuality is forbidden, what they hear is I'm forbidden, right? And that I see why that could be confusing. But what Christianity is saying is it's requiring the same thing of everyone. Everyone has the same invitation to lay
There we
down our
go.
lives, deny ourselves, pick up our cross daily, and follow Jesus. And there's no
I got a
sin
thing I
biblically
actually want on here.
is special when it comes to
Hold
that,
on,
where
I'll
we
put it
would
right here.
sanctify it in some way or
Right-
make it our
right there?
identity.
Right there.
And yet that's a very unpopular thing to say in our culture today. And so in deconstruction, I do think that LGBTQ piece is, I mean, I think you would call it a pillar. I don't think you could be accepted in that world if you hadn't left behind that quote unquote toxic theology, because that's a huge theme in
Yeah.
deconstruction as well. And so teaching that homosexuality is sinful, or that, like you said, sex is determined biologically, these are quote unquote toxic beliefs that really hurt people.
Yeah. And someone who gives way on that,
Saying that, well, they must be trying to protect their power. So the idea in deconstruction is that for the Christian to tell someone,
Okay, chat, you win. You win. You win. We're going back. We're going back. We're going back. Last 30 minutes, we're going back. Let's go back. Let's go back. Let's go back. I'm sorry. I was playing around
Why aren't they texting me?
and I made a boo-boo. There we go. Let's get back into it. Let's get back into the No, I don't want to go there. Yeah, there we go. Bam.
More death and destruction than climate change ever could. Speak to Guyana, or Ghana, I should say, and also Sri Lanka for just a minute, if you would.
Yeah, you know, I opened the chapter with those two examples because what they show is how this assumption that loving our neighbor or loving the least of these will mean promoting these climate change policies, when in fact, in those two countries, these really onerous environmental regulations set those populations back. You had emerging nations in the third world who were suddenly, because of, in Ghana's case, just discovering a new reservoir.
I'll be honest. I don't even know if I have super chats
bringing
set
them out
up.
of the
I
third
just wanted to
world.
play with
It
the
was allowing
widgets.
them to develop wealth in their
I'll cut
nation.
it out. I'll delete it.
It was
Sorry.
creating an energy
Sorry.
infrastructure, and suddenly, because
Sorry.
of these onerous climate change regulations that were part of a corrupt government trading off with the World Bank that were put in place, it threw them right back into poverty and into their third world reality. And you saw the same thing in Sri Lanka. In that case, what they did is they forced these environmental policies on, in particular, the rice farmers. That was a huge part of their national economy. And this nitrogen fertilizer was allowing them to grow much more, much healthier, and more productive rice yields. And when these environmental regulations were put on them, that resulted in much lower rice yields. That resulted in starvation. Kids passing out at school were some of the stories that you heard in Sri Lanka. People not able to get milk, to get toilet paper, to get basic necessities. In the end, there were riots in the streets, and the president of Sri Lanka had to flee the country. So these policies were incredibly harmful to poverty.
the correlation there and the parallels don't match up. Okay, so a government that was prone to corruption was influenced by outside money to make changes that their economy and society could not handle. That's terrible. That's not the United States. That's not Australia. That's not Canada. Um, I'm not sure if America is still the breadbasket of the world, but we were. And Rome was. And before that, Egypt was. So I don't think this parallels work as well as she thinks it does. I get it. They're scary. They're warnings. But the warning doesn't mean that the exact same thing is happening.
Stricken people. And that's part of what we don't talk about when we talk about.
Our government is very different than Sri Lanka. And our situation here is very different than the situation in Sri Lanka. It doesn't have to be. I mean, of course, things can deteriorate, things can get better. I mean, a whole lot of things can change, but the parallels are not exact.
About how these policies impact other nations, let alone our own nation. I think we could even talk about it's not good for our neighbors here in America to say that they need to have more expensive groceries or gas because we're.
Yeah, but that's not good here. But that doesn't have anything to do with pastors being influenced by science books. So let's say lead paint. Lead paint is bad. Mercury is bad. Lowers your IQ. All right. So you have lead. You have mercury. You have what's the third one? Asbestos. Okay. All those businesses, all those industries had people who worked in those industries and whose livelihoods depended on those industries being successful. But would you rather have children dying of cancer in older ages and having lung problems, or would you rather have some regulation to protect the kids now, even though that means some temporary pain for the people whose profession is tobacco, asbestos, lead, mercury, those miners, those people who, miners meaning like people who mine, the miners who take out these things, the scientists who refine them, the factory workers who install them, the actual home workers who put these, use these paints, use the stuff. Do we affect them, or do we protect the child and future adult from cancer? That's the question of regulation. That is the equation that is being done. If you want no regulation, if you're completely libertarian, then you're kind of an idiot. There needs to be some regulation. You don't want poison food. I've been to other countries where there's no food regulation. Trust me, you don't want that experience. You want to know that you can go to any McDonald's in the United States and you're getting food. The whole pink slime controversy happened because we have regulations. You can't have the pink slime controversy if people don't care. So your concern, while valid, is not sound. Is that the other way around? I don't know. It's been a long time since I've used those terms.
Or we're limiting our ability to produce electricity and energy. So all of these are important discussions and we can have them. But if you're doing things that I think are a little bit spiritually manipulative, like saying that this is what it means to love our neighbor, and that's the only way that we.
Okay, hey, Gavin didn't say that's the only way to love your neighbor. He said this is a good way to love your neighbor is to care about these things. And that is correct.
We love our neighbor in relation to this issue, then we have a problem because we're now circumventing a debate that should take place.
Yeah.
Oh,
I was just gonna say,
Thomas says that we've increased atmospheric CO2 levels by 50%. There you go.
You love your neighbor without killing them, because basically the Paris Accords are killing people. They're not helping people because people don't understand there's a ripple effect. It's interesting. I watched Gavin's video and he was right that there's a ripple effect. If climate change is true, it affects many other things. What he didn't seem to understand is there's a ripple effect of trying to apply a cure to the problem that is.
A, the cure is not worse than the disease in this case. B, these are the solutions that we have on table, and these are the solutions people have decided on and voted on. These are not arbitrary dictates from a king to a group of people. These are policies that are introduced, that are funded, that are supported, and that some people support and some people don't. That's why most countries have agreed to these things, and America has not, because democracy and voting is the primary way that most nations make their laws. Not all, but most. Unless you want to go to a theocracy like some of the Islamic nations, which I know you do want a Christian nation. I get that, but you shouldn't.
Worse than the disease, namely
Christendom failed and ended in war. Nasty, nasty, ugly war. You can't be unified if you have different opinions on what unification means. Protestantism is a result of Christendom. It was a failed experiment. It was not what Jesus was saying. Jesus was saying, my kingdom is not of this earth. My Father's kingdom is in heaven, not of this earth.
poverty and death of third world people who need fossil fuels in order to feed themselves. And go ahead. Yeah.
And policies usually take those kind of things into account. So, for instance, China is still listed as a third world nation, and they're trying not to lose that status, because if they lose that status, then copyright and patent can be enforced, and all their people and all their industries will get royally sued in international courts. That's why they don't want to switch to being considered a first world nation, even though if you've ever gone there, their nation has improved greatly from when Nixon went. So, I'm just telling you, you don't have all the facts, man. I'm not saying I do either, but you don't.
Part of what I was exploring. So, he very quickly in the original video said that government policies may need to be one of the solutions to this climate change issue. And the reason that was actually one of the reasons I chose his video was because that was what the secular left foundations were particularly in their report saying, that they were frustrated because they were pouring this money into this evangelical outreach, as they would put it. And they were able to get people on board with things like recycling or wanting to clean up the ocean reefs and things like that. But they were frustrated that it wasn't translating into support for particular legislation. So when you look at that, and then you look at this video from a popular young apologist that is arguing for government policy may need to be, and in fact, I think he says that it will need to be one of the solutions to this. Well, that was exactly what they hoped to see. So that made it relevant. And if I could just really quick, in case we're moving on from this topic, but one of the things that people have hit me with is, well, you said that Gavin Ortlund said that this was necessary to be faithful to the gospel or to be a faithful Christian. And that was just false. I don't know how else to put it. That quote came from the very last paragraph of my chapter on climate change, in which I was summarizing everything that had come before in the chapter. And in fact, I was referring back to someone else, a professor, Jonathan Moo, who said in a presentation at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary that creation care, which he defined as climate change activism, was necessary.
But you're including Gavin on the list of people who do these things. Like, I don't. Are you a bad writer? Do you not understand context? Do you not understand nuance? Do you not understand subtlety or connection? Do you not understand how you're being offensive to a guy who's pretty passive? Like, I'm not sure if you're getting what you're saying. And there's already been multiple times in this interview where you've shown yourself to be ignorant of the meaning of your words. Not that you're not speaking the words, not that the words don't make sense, not that you're incoherent, but that you seem to not understand the further implications of what you're saying. Because after you say the offensive thing, you then say, I don't know why he would be offended by that. I don't understand why he doesn't get why that's not about him. You've done this multiple times throughout this interview. Maybe you don't understand the implications of the things you're saying, which means you haven't thought this out far enough, which is evident by the fact that you're trying to fight against protections for the environment. Because it's politically inexpedient for you to agree with this, but you're making it a theological issue, which is not only reductive, but insane.
To be faithful to the gospel. So this quote that has been floating around wasn't a reference to Gavin at all. I can't really understand how he could have thought it was, given how books work, where usually at the end of a chapter you will have a summarizing final paragraph that is not just about one person, it's about everything that came before.
And by the way,
again, look, listen to what you just said. Listen, what Does she not speak English? I don't understand. Okay. Listen to what she just said in trying to defend that it wasn't about him, even though he's included in the chapter. Remember, this is like the same problem Protestants have with understanding that first the events had to happen, then people had to talk about the events, and then people had to write them down. It's that same weird problem they have with the Bible, but only here in oral form.
This quote that has been floating around wasn't in reference to Gavin at all.
It was the quote in my book that happens at the end of my book, at the end of my chapter, that includes Gavin, was not about Gavin at all. If she stopped there, she can get away with what she's saying. But wait.
I can't really understand how he could have thought it was, given how...
I can't understand how he would have thought it was. Again, if she stopped there, we're still in sanity land.
Books work, where usually at the end of...
And he doesn't understand how books work. Now she's insulting him. There's an ad hominem attack. We're now in fallacy land. That's okay.
You will have a summarizing
You can be a bitch and still be correct, okay? You can. I can be an asshole and still be correct. Being a jerk to someone does not make you incorrect. It doesn't. But wait 2 more seconds.
Paragraph that is not just about one person. It's about...
Again, listen.
Usually at the end of a chapter, you will have...
Usually at the end of the chapter, you have a summarizing. This is not true. Not all books have a summarizing. That's just not true. But fine. Whatever. That's how she writes. Perfectly good way to write.
Summarizing final paragraph that is not...
Final paragraph that is not
just about one person.
Just about one person. Notice the qualifying word. It's about everything, which includes the person who was mentioned earlier in the book. It's about everything. You don't have an exception clause that says, but not Gavin. It's about everything that happened here, but not about Gavin.
Everything that came before.
And by the way, friends, we will take your questions.
I don't understand how she doesn't understand English. Like I said, you can be a jerk to someone. I can be an asshole to someone. I can be a bitch to someone. I can be completely cruel and still be right. That's not the test of rightness. Kindness is not a test of truthfulness. But your word, which is he was in the chapter, but it's not talking about him. It's talking about everything that was in the chapter. That means you don't understand either what the word everything means or what the term he was in the chapter means. The English you're using is not correct. I don't understand what you don't understand about why he took offense. In a book about sellouts, about simony, you're putting in a book that literally uses a quote in the Bible that says how you're not a good pastor, how you're bad, how you're of the evil, you're not of the good. You include Gavin Ortlund. I don't agree with that assessment of him. A lot of Catholics do. You're not alone in your assessment. But then, in a chapter that you use multiple pages to explain how he's doing the exact thing that you say is wrong, you then finish that with a summary statement about the entire chapter that explains why everything you mentioned is bad for the Christian cause and part of this conspiracy to change opinions. And in that everything is included Gavin Ortlund, who you spent multiple pages explaining about. That's not a small thing. Maybe it's a small thing in comparison to the entire book, but this is within a chapter. Multiple pages in a chapter is not a small thing. So it doesn't matter how much of a jerk you're trying to be, how cruel you're trying to be, how cool you're trying to be, how whatever you're trying to be. Gavin Ortlund's offense that you're being mean to him is not relevant. What's relevant here is that you don't seem to understand the implications of your own words, and you don't seem to understand the meaning of words like everything, or phrases like Gavin Ortland was part of the everything. Why would he take offense? Why would he know? How would he think I'm talking about him, even though I talk about him for 2 pages? You get it? I know. People out there won't like the fact that I use the word bitch. I don't care. I'm a bitch sometimes. I'm literally a bitch sometimes. It's fine. I'm bitchy. It's cool. Personally, not the worst word in the world. But what is a problem is not you being mean to him. It's not you putting him on a list. It's not you saying he's an example of a bad pastor or a pastor for sale. You can have that opinion and you can justify that opinion. What's a problem here is that you're saying, how can you be offended that I'm saying this about you? Do you see what I'm saying? I have made a hour and 51 stream talking about how you and your 2 buddies don't know what you're talking about. So if you come back and say, wow, you were really a jerk about this and you don't seem to understand what I'm saying or how I'm saying things, I would say you're correct. I was being a jerk. I don't like what you're saying and I don't understand what you're saying because what you're saying is illogical. I would not say, how could you take offense into me using language that you don't approve of? Coming from a theological perspective that you don't agree with, coming from a political perspective that you disagree with, on environmental issues that you disagree with. How could you not think I'm on your side? I totally get how you would think I'm not on your side because I'm not on your side. So what is this game you're playing with Gavin where you're like, yeah, I don't like him. I don't like the things that he says. I'm going to minimize him. I'm going to insult him. But why is he getting offended? That's not Christian-like. It's a weird game to play with someone who's much bigger than you. So either you're trying to get clout and you're a grifter, or you don't understand the implications of the things you're saying. And in that case, that just takes a little bit of education. Do what Gavin said. Go read the science. Go read the books. And maybe you'll still disagree. Maybe you've already read them. Who knows? But you can't insult someone and then expect them expect them to agree with the insult. You have every right to disagree with any insult I've given today. You have any right to think that I'm completely an idiot and completely don't understand the nuance of your argument. But what you don't get to do is say, I don't know why someone's insulted when I insult him. Because then the next card is, oh, how dare someone insult me? Oh, Gavin insulted me. Why? Why? Because you insulted him first.
A little bit later in this live stream, wherever you're watching, just put in.
And I want to be very clear. I'm not talking about Childers. Childers, there's problems with her theology and problems with her reasoning. It has nothing to do with her attitude. She's amazing, to be quite honest. I wish I had her skills. What is a problem is this person's arrogance, pride, and judgmentalness. Frank Turret has completely other problems. It has to do with logic, reasoning, trust in science, trust in authority figures, distrust of authority figures. He has a lot of other stuff going on. The person in the center is not someone I would want to hang out with. It isn't. I have argumentative people here on my channel all the time, and there are people who I ask to leave my room. She would be someone I would ask to leave my room. She is not someone I would want to engage with. I would love to engage with Elisa Childers. Okay? She can disagree with me. She can reason with me. She can tell me where I'm wrong. And we can leave on good terms. Based on this interview alone, which again, this might not be a good example of what she's like, but based on her interaction with Gavin Ortland before on Twitter and under his comment section, I'm going to guess this is really what she's like. I could not reason with this person. There is no reasoning between me and this person. That doesn't mean they're a bad person. That doesn't mean they're not a Christian. That means that I would not want them on my channel because there's no way for us to have a dialogue. We would just be arguing with each other. And I think Gavin Ortlund feels that. I think Gavin Ortlund is like, I don't know why I'm being attacked. I don't understand what the problem is here. I'm not advocating for one side or another. I'm simply saying I think we should take these things seriously if we're going to take serious the command, the biblical command that I think comes from Jesus himself to be a steward, a responsible steward of the earth. Now, you can say that Gavin Ortlund is misunderstanding that interpretation of the Bible. You can say that Gavin Ortlund is misunderstanding the science. But labeling him as a pastor for sale or a pastor for rent or whatever nuance you want to add that's not present in the book, but somehow happened before the book was written, and whatever previous disagreements you have with him, you're not being an honest interlocutor. It isn't just your mannerisms. It isn't just the expressions that you're using. It isn't just your illogicalness of the word salad that you're using. It isn't just your inconsistencies. Elisa Childers is saying almost all the same things that you are. But I don't have a problem with what she's saying because not only does she believe it, or at least she's convincing that she believes it, but she's also being charitable with her deconstruction of Gavin Ortlund's words. Yes, I did that wordplay on purpose. Frank Turek is being Frank Turek. Whatever. And this might just be who you are. But I could have an argument with Frank Turek. I can have an argument with Elisa Childers. I can't have an argument with you. And I don't think Gavin can either. And I don't think Gavin understands that yet. I think Gavin is going to make the mistake that he's made with countless people online, where he thinks they're being fair interlocutors. And yes, Gavin has a little dishonesty to him. Everybody smells it. Everybody sees the intellectual dishonesty where he has a specific point of view, but he acts like he doesn't have that view because he's trying to make the tent as big as possible. That's not the worst kind of dishonesty. Wanting to be kind to people who you disagree with is not the worst kind of dishonesty. Yeah, some people don't like the odor. Some people don't like the smell of it, so they don't watch them. But what you're doing is something far worse than what Gavin's doing. Because even if you're correct, you're creating division in the body of Christ. You're creating disunity in the body of Christ on a political issue that does not go against the message of the Bible and does not go against the Christian message as a whole. Yes, you can disagree with the funding that is supporting people who speak this message, but they're not training these people to say these things. They're recruiting these people into they're funding these people and giving them larger voices because they're saying things that they agree with and that they want highlighted. Yeah, maybe that's shitty, but people I'm hoping are going to sponsor my thing. I'm hoping to get subscribers. And because I disagree with you doesn't make my subscribers bad. And because people disagree with me doesn't make the people who watch and pay for the Daily Wire bad people. It just doesn't. I subscribed to the Daily Wire for 3 months because of I wanted to watch the What is a Woman special. I liked the movie. I then started watching Matt Walsh and I was like, I don't like Matt Walsh and I do not like what's coming out of the Daily Wire. I like Jordan Peterson, so I resubscribed to listen to Jordan Peterson, and then I unsubscribed very quickly because I was only watching Jordan Peterson and I was only watching Brett Cooper and I was only watching I was going to call him Dan. Ben Shapiro. That I could watch all of their content for free on YouTube. Why was I paying for it? So I stopped paying for it because I didn't like any of the other content. That doesn't make people bad people for wanting to watch that content that I don't want to pay for. I think just like Elisa Childers is too partisan and biased, I think you're too partisan and biased. But I also think there's a level of vindictiveness and a level of grifting to what you're doing.
chat in big block letters question. We've had several come in already. We'll get to them soon. Elisa, do you want to add anything to that, or should we move on to another complaint about the book?
Clarify something very quickly, because I'm kind of watching the comments here, and a lot of people are saying, "Oh, you're saying it's such a small part of the book. Well, then apologize for misrepresenting." So let me
Agreed. Agreed. I agree with the commenters. I don't think they understand where they're wrong. I don't think these three people on the dais, I'm going to call it, understand where they're wrong.
clarify. When I said he's such a small part of the book, that was to the point that I think this is a distraction, not that I think she misrepresented him. In fact, when Megan just gave the answer about one thing he had said, I mean, a case could be made that he at least misunderstood what she had said about him. And
I don't think he misunderstood anything. I think he understood everything correctly. I think you're trying to downplay it because the fire's getting a little too hot for you.
is keeping that video up, even though that isn't when you read the book in context, you can clearly see that when she makes those statements, she's not talking about him, she's talking about these other people she has named. So again, I would
Do Protestants not learn basic reading skills in school? Simple comprehension, word order, order of events. Any? I'm dyslexic. Hey, I get word order wrong all the time. I'm just saying. Do you guys not learn it? Because there's a resource course you could take.
would just encourage everybody, don't just watch clips.
I took it.
Showed you clips because you have to on these short things. Watch his whole video, watch his environmental video, and then read Megan's book and make up your own mind. You have a brain, you have the ability to think for yourself.
You know what I'm going to do is I think I will do the clips tomorrow if we get a chance. I think I'll do the clips of that if I remember, because I'll probably move on to something else anyway. But look at that face. Look at the attitude. Look at what she's saying. Like, look at how Elisa Childers. Maybe it's because she's very experienced with TV. At least she knows how to make a somber face, an emotionally concerned face. Even if I'm saying something mean, that you're the ugliest person I've ever seen in the world, I can still sound very nice about it. Like, I'm very concerned about your ugliness. I don't know what to do. It's mean, but at least I'm sounding like I care. The facial expressions, the wording, the tone of voice. She is not projecting concern. Again, that doesn't mean that deep inside her soul, in her core, she doesn't care and she doesn't like Gavin. What she's saying, and the tone of voice, and the expression she's giving, is that she has a dislike for Gavin. I don't know if she doesn't understand that that's what she's projecting.
And of course, ladies and gentlemen, the bigger point is not whether someone was.
And again, body language reading is flawed. We talked about this during the Satanic Panic. It doesn't give an accurate representation of the facts, but it is an indicator. They're just because the science of it is false, just because the science of lie detector test, ours is called truth detector test, lie detector test is false because they don't always give. Because they can give false positives and because they don't always catch everything. So they're not reliable in that sense. Doesn't mean that you can't use it as a confluence of evidence. You can't use it as a factor in your own personal decision making. You can use erroneous things all the time in your own personal making and still get to the right decision. Now, the erroneous factor could also mess you up and send you in the wrong path, depending on how much weight you give it. But you can use a purportance of evidence, and you can order it in order of importance, in order of accuracy. You can do a lot with the facts. There are a lot of facts. Not all facts do not equal truth, and that's something that happens when arguing with atheists. Atheists get this wrong all the time. Facts do not equal truth. A fact can be true or false. It can be false or it can be positive or negative. A fact isn't anything beyond that quadrant equation. That's all that a fact is. A fact can be true or false, positive or negative. That's it. If it's a negative or a positive, then that adds to the case and it takes away. And the claim itself can be true or false. That's all that a fact is. You put enough facts together, you can come up with a conclusion. That doesn't mean your conclusion is correct. But you can use logic, you can use mathematics, you can use different methods of thinking to get to what is most likely the correct answer. And the best thing that most people can do is only go with what is most likely correct. That's how scholarship works. That's how reasoning works. That's how logic works. That doesn't mean that it's always correct. There are factors out there that change. The black swan. The black swan is a fallacy until you find it, and now suddenly it's real. So is it possible Gavin is a sellout? Of course. Is it possible that Gavin Ortlund has been influenced or been sponsored by Big Eva or Big Pharma or, name your conspiracy theory guy, Bill Gates, the Rothschilds, whatever? Of course. It's also possible and more likely that he just came up with an opinion of his own based on the stuff that he read. And you can do Occam's razor, you can do Spockian logic, whatever you want. You have to come with the conclusion that makes most sense to you. And when you're delving into conspiracy theories, you're no longer in the realm of reality. That doesn't mean that a conspiracy theory can't happen. There are RICO cases all the time. Conspiracies happen. They do. They're real. But not everything is a conspiracy, and conspiratorial thinking is flawed. It's just flawed. That doesn't mean that there can't be a conspiracy. You can find evidence of a real conspiracy. But when there's no evidence, you assuming a conspiracy is faulty logic. It doesn't mean that you're wrong. It just means that your reasoning is wrong. All right, we're well past the 2-hour mark. I apologize for using the word bitch. I don't mind that word, but I meant it in a being a jerk way and being an asshole way. I should have called her an asshole. But I don't take back the point. The point is still the same. It doesn't matter if you're being an asshole. It doesn't matter if you're being a jerk. It doesn't matter what you're being. That doesn't make you wrong. Someone being a Karen doesn't make them wrong. But being a Karen and then asking, why don't people like me when I tell them what's wrong and I report on them? Because you're being a Karen. The insult, the reason why it's an insult, because it has a negative connotation. The insult is not the word itself, it's the connotation that comes with the word. If you don't understand what your words indicate or what your words imply, then you haven't thought through your thought. You haven't thought through your words or your reasoning well enough. The reason why Frank Turek is entertaining is because he at least presents the image, the perception of thinking through the problem. And even though the majority of people in the world disagree with his conclusion, it's still interesting to see that process play out. The reason why Alisa Childers is so popular is because she went through that process and came up with the conclusion of, deconstruction and all of that is bad because look at all of this. And then she's now changing that and saying, okay, maybe that's not deconstruction, that's something else, but what I went through was bad. Okay, so she went through something, she's thought through something, and she's reaching out to prevent this from other people. Good. We don't have to agree. But you're judging Gavin Ortlund and those who agree with him, which includes me on this issue, as being unchristian because we think it is our Christian responsibility to care for this earth and care for this planet. And because we think the science is correct, we want to do things to minimize the problems the science indicates. Anyway, peace, like, and subscribe. Enjoy this video. Have a good night. Let's see if I lose subscribers for being a little too aggressive today. I love you all. The subscriber count thing doesn't seem to be working, so we'll see what happens tomorrow. But I got this to work. There's other people who talked today, but I I didn't get it working before then. Peace, like and subscribe. Have a great night. Here comes the outro music.
And when you feel like you're nothing, but you wanna be something, yeah, well, all you really need is hope. I just want you to trust me if you wanna be something. Yeah, that's right. Let's go. Yeah, when you're feeling down and you're out, like you got nothing but doubt, you're alone in the crowd, just trying to figure it out. All that is bad, and this money got you feeling left out. Listen up to me now, every word that's out of my mouth. Wake up, it's me. You gonna follow your dreams, or are you just gonna be another cog in the scene? You feel the hope in this beat, yeah, the hope that you need to proceed and be exactly what you want it to be. I feel right, and I'm proud. Hype.